welcome everyone to our special event tonight on the My Self-Reliance Tuesday night chat. This is a fabulous community, a place where we like to gather, meet everyone from all over Australia, and wherever anyone's watching from, welcome, and welcome if you're watching the recording. Tonight we have Camille Laveaux from Food Foraging Australia. Welcome, Camille.
Thank you for having me. It's so great to be here. I'm so excited to share with you the wonders of foraging and all the things that you can learn about it and how empowering it is to people when they do actually start to open their minds. So I'm really glad to be here to do that.
Oh, well, thank you for your time tonight. And so a lot of us have been fans for a while and been following your work. So before we jump into that, I just want to do two announcements. One is, if you haven't been following along in our My Self-Reliance Telegram channel, you might have missed that we do have some beekeeping talks and tours coming up in Sydney. So if you're in the Sydney area, next Saturday, the 12th of November, we've got two beekeeping tours, one in the morning from 9:30 to 12:30 and one from 2 to 5 p.m. So that will be a fabulous experience, and you get to a nice little take-home goodie bag and lunch. So it's awesome. Kids are welcome too. Then we also have WA is having their first bush survival skills workshop, a day event on the 19th of November. So very excited for that. And then we also have lots of permaculture events coming up. So stay tuned for all the fun. Go to www.myselfreliance.com.au and you'll find all the details there. Also, you can go back and have a look at our winners from the 72-hour kit challenge. Have a look at what they won, and if you are a winner, your email will be coming out to you with your voucher and hooking you up with our amazing, we had some amazing sponsors for that. And so have a look on the website. There's lots of fun things there and photos coming up. It does change from time to time. So if you haven't visited the website lately, go back and have a look. But this is where we meet every Tuesday night at this time of the evening. And we are keen to find out all about foraging for what would be otherwise known as weeds is food. So first of all, Camille, before we talk about that, let's talk about you. Let's talk about how did you get into this, a little bit about your background. Let's help us to get to know Camille.
Sure. So I started off in my first degree, which was a biomedical science degree. I completed that, but it didn't fit for me. And I had gone straight from high school into university. And at the same university, they were actually doing the paramedic degree. And I remember I used to go to my lectures for bioscience, and I used to see all the paramedic students outside practicing on the mannequins. So then when I finished the biomedical science degree and thought, you know what, working in a laboratory isn't for me, I'd love to be a paramedic. I transferred into the paramedic degree. So then I did my Bachelor of Health Science Paramedics. Then after I completed that, I worked for Ambulance Victoria for 3 years. I qualified, and then I left there in 2017. I then worked for the Royal Flying Doctors in Eastern Victoria. Then that was until late 2019, and that's when coronavirus happened. By that time, I was not really enjoying being a paramedic anyway. The hours were all wild, and I wanted to do something else with my life. Like there had to be something else kind of thing. I wasn't satisfied. So then when the coronavirus happened and then the mandates started coming in, I thought, oh, no, I'm out of here. This is my sign, for me to move on. So I then left that and then I kind of was in the same boat as everyone else, where I just didn't really know what to do, especially if we were aware of what was going on. It was almost paralyzing, that fear of like, oh no, what does the future hold? And after a while, I just got so sick of it. I thought, I want to focus on creating something that's going to help the situation rather than just reveling in the misery of it and all the fear porn and things like that. So I thought, well, I know about medicine. I love plants. I mean, I've always loved plants, and especially one of the subjects that I did in my paramedic degree was pharmacology. And my lecturer was a Shauna Darroch. She was a scientist specializing in pharmacognosy, which is the study of new medicines from plants. And she would talk about that a lot in our pharmacology unit, and I loved it. So I thought, what if I can start a group? Because by that time I was on a lot of Telegram groups anyway. I thought, why don't I start my own where I actually start literally training people? I'm not just putting up stuff and everyone just talk amongst yourselves. No, it's literally, I am trying to train as much people as I can in the basic herbal medicine and foods, so they can then share that with others. So if anything does happen, if electronics go down, or if health system collapses, anything like that, that there is enough people out there so that when even if I just trained up one person, one or two people, who then trained up two people, and then they would train up two people, that knowledge would spread, so I could kind of reignite that in my own little way, to try and at least feel like I'm doing something, or so that I'm not so paralyzed with fear, because it is, I just got sick of feeling helpless. So I started my Food Foraging Australia Telegram group, which has been going incredibly. Like, there are so many people on there that are all, like, I love them all so dearly, because they really value what they're learning as well. They see the value of it, and it's making a change in their lives from the day that they got on there. Like, so many people on the Telegram group are now starting to use plants as medicine and seeing results, and that makes me really happy. I then started my YouTube channel to do short videos. I just thought something to kind of promote what I'm doing. I did then, through my own community here in Vic West, I started doing presentation evenings, where it was about 2.5 hours of me talking through a whole bunch of slides of plants and their medicinal uses or edible uses. And everyone loved it. They absolutely loved it. It made them feel like there was something that they were doing and could do, because I did find that a lot of the speakers that we were having were just talking about a lot of negative things, whereas I thought, I want to rock up and have people walk away having learnt a new skill that they can use straight away to make them feel like they're actually doing something, rather than just being crippled with fear. And
I love that, Camille. I love your story, and the reason I love your story so much is because that's the thing that I figured out, is that we all have a skill or knowledge inside of us.
Exactly.
And I lost my job the same as you, and I couldn't go back and do that. I kind of was in business anyway, and so I didn't need the job and teaching in special needs schools. But what I figured out is, if the people couldn't work, they all needed to have something as a backup to be able to turn into an income. And that's what you've done. You've taken the knowledge that you've had, and you've turned it into a way of sharing that and passing that on. And I want to encourage everybody to think about your own story, think about what you know and what you can do that can make the difference in the world. And so that's such a legacy, Camille.
And I was very lucky. I feel like a friend of mine always says to me, we must have been born for this time. And I think back to where it all began with me, like my interest in emergency medicine actually came from one particular moment of my life. And I was 7 years old, and I was on the farm throwing a knife into the ground, and the knife went into my heel, and my grandmother was there, right? So I'm Turkish. We come from a small village in the middle of Turkey called Palabıyık, right? And in places like that, you don't actually have doctors or nurses even. So it often falls down to the oldest female of the family, or some villages will actually have a bone setter or a kırıkçı, they call them. And that is the wise woman, and they would know all the herbs. Now, my grandmother was, and her grandmother, before my grandmother came here, she was a kırıkçı, she was a bone setter. So she ran over, I'm screaming and crying, I've got this knife in my heel, and she pulls it out and she grabs this plant that was just growing next to me, rubs it between her hands, and then places it on the wound. And she says, keep that there, it'll help it heal and it won't scar, right? Me being 7 years old, not knowing any better, I did exactly what she said, and it healed perfectly. And to this day, it's the only wound I have that hasn't scarred. And that moment was what inspired me. So then every time I would hang out with my grandmother, I'd ask her to keep teaching me more, right? Because I was amazed by the fact that how well it healed, you know. And then I think that's what really inspired my desire to learn medicine as well. And so I was very lucky, but it just seems like everything in my life has come down to this one point where suddenly, you know, I do have something that I can share. But I also like to give people a message that it's not as hard as you think to transfigure yourself to something new, because we get so caught up in thinking it to ourselves that, you know, I am a nurse, I am a paramedic, I am a doctor. No, you're not. You're just a human being. Your job doesn't define you. You know, that was hard for me to let go of too when I stopped being a paramedic. But once I stopped thinking that way and starting to think about, okay, what can I do now? How can I contribute to my community, and what skills do I have? And how can I kind of, you know, put them together in a way where I can share that with people easily and entertainingly? It just worked out well for me. But it's not as hard as people think. You just need it, as you said, you just got to think about what skill do you have, you know, what can you give or teach to others. Like in our community, I started a food foraging workshop in Victoria, near where I live, because there were a lot of people in our community who were, sorry, I just got distracted by a message, who wanted workshops and wanted to learn things from other people in preparation for what was coming, but no one was putting up their hand. You know, they were umming and ahhing and going, oh, maybe I could teach this or that. Yeah. So then I thought, you know what, especially because at that time I was getting really frustrated by the echo chamber, right? I was getting really frustrated, and I thought, I'm sick of this. I'm just going to pick a day. I'm going to make up a quick flyer, and I'm just going to send it out on all the Telegram channels around here. Food foraging and introductory herbalism workshop. This day, this time, rock up, pay you $20 and learn something new, right? And it took off. And then after that, so many other people put up their hand to start teaching something as well. We had someone teaching sewing, which I think is also another very important skill. We had people a woodworking workshop where you learn how to actually use hand tools and things to work with that. We've had essential oils workshops. I know another friend of mine does meditation and mindfulness workshops. So yeah, it's really easy to just put up your hand and go, yep, you know what, I'm just going to do it. You know, I'm just going to jump in there and I'm going to do it. And you'll be surprised at how well it works, you know, and how well it can go.
So are you running workshops at the moment, or are you, yeah?
I've just started them up again. So during the heavy rain periods in the last month or so, the place that I was actually running them during winter was flooded and was completely destroyed. So I thought, well, I want to, because I did a winter series of workshops where it was the winter plants. I thought I'll give it a couple of months to rejuvenate and get back to normal. And then by that time, the spring plants would have sprung up, and being big enough for me to actually point them out and have people study them. So I've started the spring series. So the spring series, if you are, it's in Sunbury, so it's near the airport. The next one is on the 26th at 10 a.m. and it goes for 3 hours. I do have some more planned, but I don't have set dates yet. I just want to see how the first one goes. And if there is a few more people asking, because I only have a maximum capacity of 20 per class. So if I do get a few more people, then I'll set some more as well. But it is seasonal, my point being.
Yeah, very good. Very good. Yeah, we love the workshops. People love getting together in person, and we find out about it at the Zooms, and then we get in person and go get our hands on. So that's brilliant.
I also find with food foraging as well, it's one of those skills that it is better learned in person. When you actually have the plant pointed out to you in person, rather than buying a book and then looking at the picture and then still being unsure.
Yeah.
Like that's the way that I learned mushrooms. I actually went out with a gorgeous old Polish lady who'd done it since she was a child in Poland. And she taught me, right? And it was so much easier because she was like, oh yeah, that's we call that Cossack mushroom, Cossack. And I'm like, I don't know what that is, but I'm going to remember that, right? Because she pointed it out to me there and then. I looked at it, I studied it, and I took a mental picture of it, right? It's the best way to learn how to do foraging is to do it in person with someone. You can actually, there are a lot of foraging workshops that are run by other people around Australia. There's actually a fair more than I thought. I'll actually send you a link for you to share out on your group of all of the foraging courses from around. I think there's New South Wales, Queensland, and there's a few in Victoria as well. If someone does want to come to a foraging workshop, and obviously can't make it to mine because mine's the best. But yeah, so yeah, I definitely encourage people to do workshops, or you can go out doing camping trips with you, Kelly, and learn some stuff there. I mean, I'm sure there's someone in your group who knows a thing or two that can show.
So Carla is in Perth and she's wondering, do you have anyone in Perth that you would know of?
Yes. Please look up Touch of Life Foraging Adventures. That's run by
Touch of Life, was it?
Touch of Life Foraging Adventures. That's in Margaret River, which I think is near Perth. That's run by one of my administrators on Food Foraging Australia. She's an incredible woman, very smart. I trust her wholeheartedly, and you'll have an incredible time.
Beautiful. Thank you for that tip. Love it. Now, should we share the screen and go into some of those?
Yeah, let's get into it.
Let's do it. Okay. Oh, I have to fix up my PowerPoint, otherwise I'm going to give away too much. Okay, let's share that screen. All right, here we are from the beginning. Okay. Haha, that's you. Let's start with this one. Now, we were talking about this one before we press record.
Yes, we were.
So this one is wild lettuce, and it looks like wild lettuce. This one's easy for me to remember, I feel like, because it does have that lettucey green. It's, that a good cross between a cos and a iceberg, I guess. I don't know, to me that does.
Yeah.
Yeah, jump in and let's tell us about this one.
So this is the wild lettuce, or the Lacticarium cereola. Now, there are two varieties that are known as the lettuce opium, which is the Lactica cereola and the Lactica virosa. Now, the easiest one to identify and the most common one is this one, which is the Lactica cereola. Now, it is related to the lettuce. It's part of the lettuce family. It is edible, completely edible, the whole thing, stem and leaves. It has a lot of different names. It's also known as the compass plant because the leaves actually will tilt onto their side and be directly facing north and south. So when you look at it from above, its leaves will actually align exactly to north and south. So that's a fun little tip just for navigation if you see one of these things about. So this is known as lettuce opium or opium lettuce because it actually secretes a white sap called Lacticarium. Now the Lacticarium has a mechanism of action that is very similar to morphine. So this plant is used for pain relief, anxiety, and also as a hypnotic, which is to help you go to sleep. So the leaves can be eaten raw or cooked. And in order to utilize its pain relief properties, it's a lot more efficient to actually process it into Lacticarium. So if you do want to, let's say, for example, prepare some Lacticarium, it's basically you boil about 2 to 3 plants, whole plants, fresh. Sorry, not boil, but on a low simmer. On a low simmer, you will boil these up for about half an hour. And then once the water gets like a dark brown tea-like color, remove the plant matter and then continue to simmer it on a low heat for a few hours until it reduces to a very thick tar-like substance. It'll be like brown tar. That substance is called Lacticarium, and that's what you use for very strong pain. Now it does actually have a little bit of a punch, so you try not to take too much of it. A good concentrated Lacticarium, you'd only need about a teaspoon of it to get strong pain relief effects. And you can store it as well very easily. If you do want to...
So just quickly, so when you're using it for strong pain, you're going to drink that tar-like substance, are you?
Yeah, if it's still watery, you can just down it in a shot glass. You can even just make a concentrated tea as well. So if you wanted to just, because making a Lacticarium takes a couple of hours. If you did want faster relief, you can just make a weaker Lacticarium by boiling about half of the plant and then boiling it down to about a cup and then drinking it down in one shot. But the proper thickened Lacticarium is best for actual storage. So if you want to keep it for longer periods. And because this is a plant that is seasonal, so this is a biannual, which means that you'll get 2 flushes of these plants a year. So you'll get one in about the peak of autumn, and then in the peak of spring. That's when the adult plants will be growing. In middle to late winter, you don't see any of these. So it is something that if you do have an abundance of them, which usually this will grow suddenly in abundance, harvest as much as you can. You can dry it for teas and things like that. But specifically for pain relief, I would actually prepare Lacticarium, or you can actually tincture this as well. So I don't know if anyone here has tried tincturing before. Tincturing is an alcohol extraction of phytocompounds from medicinal herbs. So the process for that is very easy. You can use fresh or dried herbs. You just fill a jar, stuff it full of the herb that you want. For example, it would be this herb here, the Lactica. And then you just cover that with regular vodka, 37 to 40%. 37% to 40% is more than okay. You will get a lot of people that say, "Oh, I've heard to use 90% or basically moonshine," and then they just water it down. Well, 37 to 47% alcohol is 60% water, so you don't need to water it down, because they'll say that, "Oh, but you need the water to extract the water-soluble compounds." Well, normal cheap vodka will do that. So you just cover the entire herb with vodka, and then you let it sit for a minimum of 4 weeks, right? And it will get this beautiful brown golden color. And then after 4 weeks, you remove all the herbs, you sieve it out, and then you bottle that alcohol. And that's what you take when you're in pain. Now, I know someone is going to ask, oh, but how much do I take? Okay, here's the thing. When it comes with tinctures and herbal medicines, it varies from person to person. The best thing with tinctures, especially for something like pain relief, is start off with 1 to 2 drops and see how you go. And then if you do need more, you can take more. So that's how you'll prepare a tincture of this. And again, if you want to eat this plant is very good eating. I definitely recommend it. Great as a salad herb. Or if you want, if you're a little bit stressed, what you can do is go home, find a couple of these plants, and then eat a big salad made from this plant. And it will actually really help reduce your anxiety and help you get to sleep as well. So that's the Lactica. Any questions on the Lactica?
Yeah, just one. So we can think of it like a paracetamol, like that kind of pain relief, or like a headache, or actual body aches and pains, or.
So this is a different mechanism of action to Panadol. So Panadol is a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory, whereas this is an opioid. Think of the pain relief that this gives you like the pain relief that THC or cannabinoids would give you. So like marijuana. So it's more akin to that. It has its own, it by no means is psychoactive. It isn't. It's not mind altering at all. But it's a lot more like morphine in the way that it works. So I would use this for strong joint pain, muscle aches, back aches. You can use it. You can use it for headaches, but not for strong migraines. Although there are a few people on my channel who have used it for migraines and gotten good results, I would probably pair it with the non-steroidal anti-inflammatories that are kind of, which I'll get to in a moment. But yeah, I would not use this for migraines, but minor kind of everyday headaches, absolutely go for it.
Okay, let's just go to the chat real quick. Any questions from anyone in the chat?
Yeah, there was a question. So when to harvest this? Now, you'll hear different things from a lot of different places. Personally, I've noticed that when I break the stems, there is more Lacticarium before it begins flowering. So when a plant starts to flower, it's going to funnel all of its energy and nutrients into creating those flower heads, which means that it builds up its Lacticarium in its stem. And then when it begins to flower, it sucks it all up into the flower stems. Do you use the stem, leaves, and root? Not the root, only the stems and the leaves. So I just cut them at the very base, and then I take them home and then I put them into whatever I'm using them for. But no, not the root. So you don't use the root. So yeah, I personally harvest them before they begin to flower, when they are matured, because that's when I've noticed they have the most milk. Yes, you can. Yeah, you can use them when they've flowered, but you will have to use more plants to get the same amount of Lacticarium if you use the water method, the water extraction, where you boil it down slowly. But give it a go. I mean, it honestly, it shouldn't make much of a difference. I mean, the variation is subtle, but I just noticed that it bleeds more milk if you cut it right before flowering. And that just saves me time having to find more plants in order to make a good amount of Lacticarium.
Camille, can you type this word Lacticarium in the,
sure.
in the chat? I think it's a word we all should get to know a little bit more.
I've been saying it a lot, haven't I?
Just not sure how to spell it. Okay, thank you. Lactucarium. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, shall we go to the next one?
Yes, do that.
All right. Next we have Sow thistle.
Yes, so sow thistle
Sow
is,
thistle. Thank
some
you.
people say so. Sow thistle gets its name because it was actually used in the olden times as food for pigs, for livestock. Now, this thistle is used, so first of all, it's completely edible as a salad herb. You can eat it raw or cooked. It does get quite bitter as it gets older. So it's best to actually save the younger thistles for eating and use the older ones for medicine. So the sow thistle flowers are used as a Panadol substitute. So remember how you were asking before about like Panadol, or if you would use Panadol? For something like headaches and migraines, this is what I would use. So the part of this plant that we're using is the flowering part. Now you can actually you can use them before they've opened or after they've opened. Just collect the entire flower head and then boil that as a tea and then drink it. So this is actually a traditional Maori medicine. They call it puha, and it's for pain relief or specifically for things like headache. You can also make sow thistle capers as well, where you pickle the actual flower heads and they turn exactly into like a caper to have with like salads and things like that. I mean, I love capers, although I've never actually made sow thistle capers before. I usually dry them for medicine. But the way that you would identify this plant as well, a lot of people confuse this for dandelion. Now, the difference between this and dandelion is, can you see on the picture where the flowers are all clustered together off one stalk? That is a sow thistle. A dandelion will only ever have one flower on one stalk. And the dandelion, all of the leaves and the flowers will grow from one spot on the ground, whereas the sow thistle will grow up to a tall stem, and have lots of leaves growing off it. Now, although it is a thistle, it doesn't really have doesn't have spikes or anything on it or spines. There are some tiny little hair-like protrusions on the edges of the leaves, but the leaf shape can vary. So for the sow thistle, just remember that it's best eaten when young, or the young leaves, only pick off the young leaves, because it does get bitter with age. And for the pain relief properties of the flower heads, I mean, look, about 5 to 10 flowers in a tea, depending on your size. So 5 flowers if you're a small female, 10 flowers if you're a large male, would be enough adequate for something like a headache, for pain relief, or sprains as well, anything where there's inflammation. So migraines as well. This is excellent for migraines because migraines are actually very well treated by the non-steroidal anti-inflammatories. Actually, the best plant for migraines is the white willow, which contains aspirin. Aspirin is actually the best treatment for migraine, but you need to take it when you feel it coming on. It's another handy tip there.
Great. Thank you. All right. Any questions for that one, anyone? Let me go to the chat. Ray says, I'm collecting and drying the flower heads. I'm also placing fresh in honey. Am I on the right track? Can I eat the dried flowers down the track?
From the honey, yes. Yeah, you can eat them. Just be wary when you're infusing into honey that if you're using fresh, the water content of the plant matter will make it susceptible to spoilage. So when it comes to honey infusions, I do like to use at least semi-dry or very dry plant matter. So then it will take a little bit longer to infuse, but it will mean that there's less likely to get a pocket of moisture, which will then spoil. But you can use them. You can eat them. So you don't really need to wait that long anyway. So it's be the same time for a tincture, about 3 to 4 weeks for a honey infusion. But if you put them in dry, then you can store it indefinitely. So instead of taking the risk of it spoiling by using it fresh, if you just infuse the honey using dry plant matter, then you can screw the lid on or mix it up, screw the lid on and put it in the pantry and forget about it. So yeah, just to avoid the chance of any spoilage or fungus, because sometimes what happens is the plant matter will poke up above the line of the honey, and then it can be susceptible to mold. So although honey is a fantastic preservative and antibiotic and stuff like that, you don't want to take any chances when it comes to food, because I mean, even some very simple bacterial or fungal infections can turn into very complicated things that can be dangerous, like botulism, you know. But yes, always use dry and you'll be fine.
Very good. I've said I rub the white milk from the sow thistle leaves on my daughter's mozzie bites and they immediately stopped itching.
Yeah, well, a mosquito bite is what? It's an inflammatory reaction caused by the saliva of the mosquito. And if this is an anti-inflammatory, that's exactly what's going to happen. It's going to prevent the inflammation occurring and then the irritation to the nerves, that which then causes the itching. So that makes total sense.
Beautiful. I know I've taken lots of notes, but I know that I want to go back and listen to this again. So love it. Okay, we'll go on to the next one. All right. Tell us about mouse barley.
Mouse barley. So I wanted to talk about this one because we often talk about weeds that are for, you know, I always hear this phrase as a spinach replacement. Always seem to hear that from every forager, right? Well, I wanted to talk about this plant because this is actually a grain replacement. So replacing wheat and like things to make bread from. You know, there's only so many salads you can eat, you know. So I figured, okay, well, I'll talk about this plant because this plant was used back from ancient times, especially even in Britain. It was used when finer grains were unavailable. So when wheat was unavailable and rye was unavailable, they would harvest mouse barley. Now this plant, I don't know about you guys anywhere about where you're living, but I'm seeing this everywhere at the moment. It grows absolutely everywhere. The mouse barley, you'll see those distinct seed clusters that will have the long hairs on them. And the great thing about the mouse barley is as it comes to foraging, you can forage a lot of seed off very few plants. So it's worth your time and effort putting it into this because it does require some preparation. So the way that you would prepare mouse barley in order to create a grain, which then you can mill and turn into flour, you need to collect the flowering, the seed heads just as they're beginning to turn golden as they are here. So once you harvest those, you need to dry them until they are completely dry and beige colored. Like, so all the green will go and it will turn kind of like a honey color. Then after that, what you need to do is you need to go on blank on the word. You need to remove the chaff. There's a specific word for it.
Like sift it?
No.
Grind?
No. Anyway, you need to remove the chaff, which is the outer part of the seed capsule, which is like the papery kind of stuff. So the way that you can do that is when you've dried it, winnowing is what you do afterwards. So winnowing is when you toss it into the air and you separate it out. Basically, what's the word? To remove the chaff from the grain, you need to smack it with a stick or you need to rub it between your hands when it's dry. So that will break up the seed heads and it will actually break open those little papery parts. And that's when, after doing that, you would collect them all up and then winnow them, either using a gentle breeze. So I don't know if anyone's ever seen it before, where you'll see people tossing grains into the air outside. And then what they're actually doing is called winnowing, which is separating the chaff, which is the inedible outside of the seed, the papery stuff of the seeds, from the actual grain. And then, using a gentle breeze, you just need to toss the grains up and that will separate it out. You can also do kind of like a more, instead of tossing them up into the air, just put down like a bucket or something underneath you and then just slowly tip them in with a breeze or a fan facing it, just to separate it out. That's the quickest way to do it. So then once you've dechaffed and winnowed it, that's when you can either boil it just as a grain in what's known as a pottage. So one of the ways that the Old English would eat a lot of their food as well as this, but they would create what's known as a pottage, which is a soup or like a chunky soup made of two base ingredients, so a grain and water. So they would put something like a mouse barley into water, boil it, and then every other ingredient was whatever they found at the time growing around them. So they would go out and they would forage, and then they would just put everything else, whatever they could find, into the pottage. So it was a seasonal meal because, of course, everything that was growing around them would change through the season. But the base ingredient was always the same, because they would harvest a lot of this come springtime, and then they would store it, and that would be stored for their pottages. So that's one way you can eat it. You can also grind it up to make a wholemeal flour. Now, another great thing about this grain is it's gluten-free. So if you are gluten intolerant, this is an acceptable grain for you to be able to consume. That does also mean that however, that it doesn't get that stretchiness as what flour does. So it will be more like a damper rather than anything else, but it's certainly better than no grain at all. So yeah, it often grows very easily too. Grows very easily.
I love gluten-free, so I'd be so into that. And I'm like, wow, can't you buy it? No, but you don't want to buy it. We want to forage for it. How even better. Let's see, any questions from that? Was the word that you said willow or willow?
Winnow.
I wrote
W-I-N-N-O-W.
winnow. Got you. Okay. Thank you.
I have a question. It's too long to write. So
Yes.
Is there a chance that we could easily, is there another grass that is similar to this? I'm just wondering, I know I've seen this somewhere and I've felt it, but could I easily confuse it with another kind of grass, or is it very easy to identify?
Very easy to identify, because the only other lookalike is a type of grass. I think it's called a couch grass. But the one distinct feature of the mouse barley is that at the end of every seed, there's that long hair kind of. Can you see on the picture how the seed heads look like they're all kind of fluffy or have like hairs all over them? Those long hairs only occur on the mouse barley. There is no other lookalike that I've ever seen that is as distinct as mouse barley. So if you think you saw mouse barley, you most likely did. The only other one that it could be is actual wheat, which looks a lot like this, but wheat grows very tall, whereas this will only grow to about 20 centimeters tall.
Great. Anyone in, I don't know if I've seen it in New South Wales. Anyone near me has seen this one?
If you don't have this growing about around you, look up also annual ryegrass. So R-Y-E, ryegrass. If you don't have this growing around you, maybe you might have ryegrass, which is also another grain. You do need to collect more of it in order to get a good amount of grain, because there's not as many seeds on a seed head. And you also need to be careful with rye, that when you store it bone dry, and you don't store it for long periods, or else you'll get a fungus growing on it, which is a type of black fungus called ergot. And what ergot is actually a fungus that is where LSD originated. So LSD, the drug, originated from ergot fungus. And if you eat grains that have been, or rye grains infected with ergot, you get what's known as ergotism, which is hallucinations and madness, basically madness. There is a theory that actually one of the reasons for the mad epileptic fits and stuff during the Salem witch trials was because, and all the crazy stories, was because the rye harvest had actually been infected with ergot, and people were getting ergotism. So that's one of the reasons they think. I mean, yeah.
Careful of the funky bread.
What is a safe time to store rye seed? If it's bone dry, I would consume it within at least a month or two. I would not store it for longer than that. And I would be checking it very frequently. Well, I would check it before I used it each time. Make sure there's no black sootiness to it or nothing growing within it, just to be sure. But if you've harvested it, then let's say you harvest multiple grains. You've harvested rye, you've harvested mouse barley. Save the mouse barley for longer storage and eat the rye grains first.
Good questions. We like that. Beautiful. All right. Shall we move on to the next one? If there's no other questions, we'll go to, and I love that. As you say, quite rightly, there's a really good grain, because we can't all just eat salads all the time.
Yeah. That's like when people say to me, oh, do I take this as a tea? Do I take this as a tea? If you have multiple conditions, how many cups of bloody tea do you need to drink a day? It's just to keep your body functioning. So I always say to people, I take most of my stuff as tinctures, because it's just a couple of drops underneath the tongue and that's it. I can walk out the door. I don't need to be constantly carrying around a cup, drinking liters of teas.
100%. Yeah, good point. All right, wild mustard. This is a pretty one.
Yes, wild mustard. So this is my favorite go-to edible plant. This is in the Brassica family, which is the I've gone blank again. Broccoli, of course, broccoli. It's related to the broccoli, which is the Brassica family. It actually even smells exactly like broccoli. Now, this is another plant that I see everywhere, and I see fields of it, often confused for canola. But canola has one distinct difference, and it's a crude distinction, but canola produces a scent on its flowers that very distinctly smells like dry saliva, I think anyway. Do you know when you roll onto your pillow and you kind of smell that spot you drooled on? It smells like that. But this one has no smell. It has absolutely no scent. The flowers will have 4 yellow petals each, and they will cluster. And down the stem of this plant, you will find little seed pods. And that's the actual mustard, which you can actually ferment and turn into an actual mustard, condiment mustard. And it's very spicy. It has that mustard spiciness to it. So you can eat the leaves as well, raw or cooked. Now you can also lacto-ferment the flowers. So I've actually got a video on my YouTube where I show you how to make sauerkraut, which you can actually do with any kind of edible flower. It doesn't just have to be the wild mustard. It can be any kind of edible flower. And you basically just mix them in with salty water and a few cabbage leaves, of course, kind of like you're making a kimchi. And then you ferment them all, and it makes a beautiful side dish. Very good for you. And the best thing about it, personally, for a survival thing, is that it's just everywhere, and it's year round. I see fields and fields of it everywhere.
Now, reminds me of a lantana bush because of its tiny little flowers. Now it's probably not like that, but uh, does the lantana bush have any good properties to it that we should know about?
I'm not familiar with the plant.
Oh, okay. I'll send you through a picture and you
Yes,
can.
please.
Yes. And from my memory, I think the actual plant itself is not fabulous, but I think it does things for other plants. It's one of those.
Oh, that's another really awesome skill to learn. Companion planting. For gardeners, learn companion planting. I recently just looked into that and it looks amazing. Although, again, I'm not a gardener. I don't bother gardening. I just go out and find it myself.
Right.
One of the questions was, is it introduced or native? I'm not actually sure. So I'd have to look that up. But if you do find out, tell me in the comments.
Yeah, often in paddocks, right? And so
Yeah, paddocks, literally anywhere it can get a foothold. It's not picky with its soil either. So it will grow in very poor soil. Oh, another great thing about weeds as food and medicine is that they grow in even the poorest of soils, and they don't require a lot of water either. So you don't need to be constantly watering them. Medicinal benefits, other than its nutritional value, there are no medicinal benefits that I know of. I certainly wouldn't be turning to this plant for a specific treatment to something, but that's as far as I know.
No, this one's more about tastiness.
Food, yeah.
Yeah, and adding flavor, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, especially that mustiness, that spiciness.
Love that. Okay, we've got, this is the last one.
Mm-hmm. So Usnia lichen. Now, if you were to ever remember a plant, specifically if you're a prepper or you're a camper, it would be the Usnia lichen. Now, the Usnia lichen is a lichen which is a combination of a mushroom and a plant together in one species. It's not to be confused with the old man's beard that they sell at like Bunnings. It's like a large hanging plant. That's called the Tillandsia usnioides, which is not actually a Usnia lichen. That's why it's usnioides, which means Usnia-like. This is Usnia. It's the true Usnia. It's a lichen. It's very slow growing. And this is solely medicinal. So this is a antibiotic and antifungal. So if you have any kind of external infection, internal infection, something like a UTI, I would be foot fungus. If you have dandruff, and I'll explain all the reasons as well, I'm just listing them off. I would be reaching for the Usnia to be treating those conditions. Now, the reason why the Usnia is important to know is because if we do run out of antibiotics or don't have access to antibiotics, we are going to have to go to natural alternatives, although most medicines come from nature anyway. But because it's very difficult to synthesize penicillin from a penicillium fungus, the next best thing is Usnia. It's a very powerful antibiotic. Now, the only caution I would say with this plant is don't consume or drink too much of it if you do have an internal infection, because it will actually sterilize your gut. So when you take antibiotics, one of the side effects is that it causes stomach upset. That's because you kill off a lot of the good bacteria as well as the bad bacteria or the bad whatever it is that's causing the infection. So you would need to take a probiotic with this. So something like yogurt or something like that. So for internal, just a small handful, you can use this fresh or dry, just a small handful, boil it in water for at least 20 minutes, and then you would drink the resulting tea. If it's an external infection, for example, I've got a cut on my leg from bushwalking. I wrapped it up, but now it's looking a bit infected. What I would do is boil this, create a tea to extract the compound, and then soak the bandage soak a bandage in the Usnia tea once it's cooled, and then place it on the wound. So that will actually create a layer which will soak into the wound and then kill any bacteria causing any infection there. You can actually put the bandage on from the get-go. When you got the injury, find some of this, boil it up, soak the bandage and then use it. Or you can even wash wounds with this. When you boil the tea, you just wash the wound and irrigate it with it. I was going to say something important. Where to find this? Now, I most commonly, or you'll most commonly find this in wet, temperate rainforest or forest or bush. It does like moisture and it likes sunlight. So yes, it does grow on rotting wood. Often found on the lower parts of the forest. So on fallen branches, or the northern side of trees, because it loves sunlight. And in the southern hemisphere, facing north, the north is where the sunlight comes from. So you'll find this on the northern face of trees. So if you see a tree, that's one side of it, its trunk is covered in this and the other side isn't, the side that this is on is north, right? So you can collect this, collect a lot of it in places like that because it grows on everything, rocks, eucalyptus trees, dead branches. You won't, yes, you can preserve it. I was going to get to that. So this is best stored dry. It dries very quickly because there's not much substance to it. It's just fine hairs. It dries very quickly and it can store for a long time as dried. Although when it comes to storing medicinal herbs, always try and refresh them, even if you haven't used them, at least every 5 months, right? 4 to 5 months. Because even when you're storing them in an airtight jar and all that, it's still going to oxidize. The compounds in the dead plant will slowly oxidize. So if you've had something on the shelf that's been sitting there all dry for a year, it's not going to work as well as if it were fresh or just newly dried. So it does store and it does store well, but as a general rule of thumb for all plants, including this one, if you are going to store it dried, always try and store it or try and get more or use it up within at least 5 to 6 months. Another way that you can actually preserve the compounds of this is by tincturing. Again, tincturing is another fantastic way for us to preserve the medicinal compounds of any plant. So what you would do, again, as I explained with tincturing before, is you replace all of the herb into a jar and then cover it with regular 37 to 40% alcohol, and then let it sit in the jar for a minimum of 4 weeks. Now, make sure, sorry, I forgot to mention with the tinctures, is make sure you store them away from sunlight. So often you'll see tinctures in glass amber bottles. Now, the amber color will prevent some UV radiation from getting through and destroying the compounds, but it will still degrade over time with other things like temperature fluctuations. The oxygen getting into the bottle every time you open it to use it slowly oxidizes that tincture. So try and store it in a dark place, but also a place that does not to stop gas buildup. No, this is not a fermentation process, so you don't need to burp them. So there's no fermentation going on, so no gas is produced. So yeah, tincturing is a really great way to preserve compounds, and tinctures will last longer than dried herbs, because alcohol is a far better preservative than just dry air, you know.
That's so great. I need to get out and buy my vodka. Got a good reason to now. That's awesome. Iva, would you like to ask a question?
Yes, I have. So you mentioned that it's slow growing. So and in my area, I probably wouldn't be able to find too much of it. So if I found it, would I be best to kind of not take the whole amount that I've found and leave some on the tree? Is that necessary for it to continue or to regenerate? Or is it okay to just take it all?
It's perfectly fine to take it all, because the actual, the base of the actual Usnia lichen is a plate-like lichen. So it starts off plate-like and then will grow its filifrons. And when you actually go to harvest this, you won't actually manage to get it all off anyway, because it breaks very easily at the base. So you'll still have a few hairs growing on there. Now, if you do find this in a forest, I guarantee you there's plenty of it growing around everywhere. And every time I found it, it's been everywhere. Now, it grows small and slowly, but I come back from what, when I go foraging for this to kind of stock up for my shop, I come back with at least a shopping bag full. Like when you find it, it's everywhere. Apple cider vinegar as a tincture base. Yes. You can use apple cider vinegar as a tincture base to extract your compounds as well. I've also heard of glycerin being used, a vegetable glycerin, although it will take longer with vegetable glycerin because it's a far more viscous substance, so it's thick. But if you don't want to use alcohol, or alcohol is not available, apple cider vinegar is perfectly usable. You can also use other fruit vinegars that you can create yourself. I definitely encourage people to try making their own vinegar. But yeah, the go-to other substitute for alcohol is apple cider vinegar. Although I don't use apple cider vinegar because I hate the smell. It smells like feet.
Oh no, I love that tip. Thank you. I'm using that.
Yeah.
I drink apple cider vinegar with honey as a go-to drink. So
excellent.
Yeah.
Yummy.
So
if you created a sour thistle flower honey infusion and then you used that with your apple cider vinegar for headaches, for example, it's very simple to infuse medicines into your everyday foods.
That is good, because you do want to get used to using it and have it just become second nature, not just as this thing, oh, what if I don't want to mess it up. You have to practice with it, right? Okay. Okay. Andrew said, we have vodka that's been in the fridge for years. Can you use that for a tincture? Is that going to work?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And Carla has a question.
Yes, thank you. Do you have to be precise and exact on the measurements when you're tincturing a fresh herb, for example? Do you have to measure it completely, or can you just cut it up, put it in a mason jar, whatever, and then just pour the alcohol and fill it to the top? Or do you have to really measure it? Can you just wing it?
So you need a lot of plant matter when you're creating a tincture. So if you use a dry herb, you need to be mindful that when you cover it with alcohol, it is going to absorb some of that alcohol. So if you have enough alcohol and you've mixed it with dry herb and it's covering it, when you see it the next day, the alcohol level would have gone down and the plant matter would now be floating above the alcohol. So when you are making a tincture, you need to be wary of alcohol absorption, which will drop the level, and you need to shake it every day. So you need to be agitating it every day, not opening it, just shaking it. Now, for amounts, however much plant matter you use, you need to just make sure that you've put enough alcohol in to cover the plant matter. Because although I've made plenty of tinctures, I made heaps of tinctures, and I've never had any problems with any kind of mold or fungus or anything, because alcohol is a sterilizing agent anyway. So as long as I'm shaking it every day, it doesn't really matter that it's appearing above. When it comes to whether you should use dry or fresh, really doesn't make a difference. I often prefer fresh because that's going to be the freshest. It's going to have the most compounds. It hasn't been sitting around anywhere drying and slowly degrading over time. So if I was to say, should you use fresh or dry? Of course, always use fresh. That's a no-brainer. But if dry is all you have because it's a seasonal herb, then by all means use dry. Just be wary of the fact that the alcohol level is going to drop. So if you have enough alcohol in there and you're like, oh, that should be enough, just be mindful that the next day you may need to top it up to get that still that same amount.
Got it. Thank you. Thanks.
Great questions. And kombucha, can you use kombucha instead of to ferment? Oh no, we're not fermenting, are we? Oh no, to turn into a vinegar. So a kombucha to turn into a vinegar, and then use kombucha as the apple cider vinegar.
Yeah, as long as all of the fermentation process has ended in the substance. So if there's still a live bacteria in it causing fermentation, then it could begin to ferment all of the compounds in the plant matter. I would imagine. I don't know. I'm kind of making an educated guess. It would be okay to use as long as it is at now the vinegar stage and has stopped fermenting.
Got it. Wow. So good. Now, I imagine we've just gone through 5 tonight, and there'd be so many more that we could talk about. And it's enough for us all to get excited and to wet the whistle and go, okay, well, let's dive in and learn more. Carla, do you have another question, or is your hand up from before? Just checking.
No, that was still there from before, so I'm
Okay.
fine. Thank you.
I will actually just mention, someone's just brought up a really good point in the chat. The best way to dry your herbs, is not, especially if they're medicinal herbs, don't use sunlight. It's very tempting to sun dry your herbs, but UV radiation will destroy those compounds, okay? So it will be less potent after a couple of days of sun drying than when you first picked it. The best way to preserve your medicinal compounds or to dry them is slowly, either by placing them on a newspaper in a not sunny, but dark area with good ventilation. And you need to make sure that there is good ventilation, because that air movement is what's going to help dry them slowly. If you don't have a week to wait for them to dry like that, another really good way that I use is a dehydrator. I have a dehydrator. I love it. I use it often. You can use a dehydrator. Any temperature is perfectly fine. It just depends on really how quick you need it. Sorry, not quick, how quick you need it, but I use the high settings on like thin leaves, just so I can get it done quickly and then store it. Because then again, you need to keep in mind, I dry a whole lot of herbs because I have a shop. I do a market where I sell my herbs. You can use that. If you don't have a dehydrator, what you can do is on a very low heat, about 70 to 80 degrees in your oven, you can place them on a tray in an oven, and then with the fan on and the door ajar, you can dry them in there for, it'll only take about an hour or 2 to dry completely in an oven, a fan-forced oven, but it must be a low heat. And another method as well is just place the herbs in front of a pedestal fan on a paper, or on a towel or a newspaper or some clean paper, and put the pedestal fan on low heat. Sorry, not low heat, low speed, and facing the herbs, and that air movement across the herbs will also dry them in about a day or 2. And that's, I found, a really good way to dry them as well. So yeah, just keep in mind for drying, as tempting as it is to use sunlight, don't use sunlight. And if you have large plants that you want to dry, for example, I dry my my opium lettuce or my Lactica cereolas. I just cut them at the base and then dry them hanging upside down in a cool, dark room, and they just dry like that, and they preserve really well like that too. So you can store them like that, so you don't have to go through the whole process of picking off all the leaves and things like that. Just cut the entire plant at the base and hang it upside down somewhere and forget about it. It'll dry on its own.
I love that. Camille, what do you sell in your shop?
So on my Etsy shop, if you want to look at my Etsy shop, you can find it by searching Food Foraging Oz, as in OZ, in Etsy, and my shop will come up. So on my Etsy shop, I have my e-booklet, which is a series of 24 fact sheets on 24 different plants. On those fact sheets, it includes what it's used for, how to identify the plant, and how to prepare them for medicinal use. So that's on my Etsy shop. It's called The Home Herbalist. I also have these, which are, these are foraging cards. So during my workshops, people loved the workshops, right? But a lady actually approached me afterwards and said, Camille, I loved your workshop, but I go walking now and I recognize the plant, but I've forgotten its name. So maybe you could have something that could help me with that. So then I came up with these foraging cards, which is, they're laminated individual cards. So this is the one on weeds. So the 12 most important weeds, I personally think that people should know about. They're individually laminated. There's a picture of the plant, what it's used for, and on the back of the card is the identifying features of that plant. So then you can actually know what you're looking at is what it is in the picture, and you'll know exactly what it's used for and if it's edible or not. It's pocket sized, so you can take it hiking, because personally, I'm not going to certainly hike around with a massive book in my bag or my pocket or something like that. It's lightweight, it's easy. I also have one of these on mushrooms. I have a mushroom foraging cards as well, which is 10 different medicinal and edible mushrooms, mostly edible. Not, I think three of them medicinal, which is the lion's mane, the lion's mane, artist conch, and the Australian reishi. So yeah, I have the fungus one as well. I do sell tinctures on my Etsy shop. I have 3 different kinds of tinctures. I have an immunity tincture, which is my own blend of immunity herbs, which is dandelion, wormwood, echinacea, and astragalus root. I also have a sleep tincture, which is valerian, passiflora, and skullcap, which are for aiding in sleep. And I also have, what's my other one? Nettle tincture. Nettle tincture. So I'll quickly mention this as well. Nettle is a fantastic antihistamine. We're getting into the hay fever season now. Start taking your nettle now, because you need it in order for nettle to be effective against hay fever. You need to take it before the hay fever season begins. Yeah, I'll share the website. I'll put the link to the website on the Telegram group, if that will help people. So yeah, I still have plenty of cards, foraging cards left. And yeah, that's all I sell on there at the moment, but I am working on other things.
Great. And Camille, I'll talk to you about getting your links onto my website as well. So
lovely.
That'd
be great. Thank you.
Beautiful. Well, so much great information. I love tinctures, and I love that you've put those together. And I love that you've shared how to do it. But of course, there's so many of us out there that go, I am time poor. I'm just going to come to you and buy pre-made.
Yeah.
So we love that.
My initial thing was to help others to do it themselves, and I still prefer to do that. I will always tell people how to do it themselves before I sell them anything. That's the thing, right? But it's
because that's all about what self-reliance is about.
Exactly. You're not going to learn if you don't do it. You know what I mean? You're not going to learn if you don't do it. So get out there and try it first.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much. It's just hand in hand what we do together. So thank you so much, Camille, for coming on tonight. It's been fabulous. Everyone has loved it, and we'll have you back again, I'm sure.
I would love to. Thank you so much, everybody, for your time.
Thank you.
And as by way of announcement as well, if you haven't grabbed your ticket to the online canning class on the 25th of November, it's a Friday night. That's with Atta, our famous canning lady. she's going to come on Zoom and do a canning workshop, so you can be anywhere across Australia and join in for that. That would be so much fun. Even if you've done the canning course, I know sometimes it can be a little bit daunting to go back, but just you need to work through a few things together with her. That's the great place to do it. So thanks everyone for jumping on tonight, and we're going to press stop on the record. And as always, if you want to stay in the room and have a chat, you're welcome to. That's where all the fun really happens. So we'll see you back here next Tuesday for some more fun. Talk to you then.
Thanks, Camille. Thanks, Kelly.
Thank you. Fabulous.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Kelly recommends these nutritious fast foods for your grab-and-go bag. This vegan, non-GMO, gluten and dairy-free 72-hour pack provides you with loads of energy to keep you full for longer. Grab your Summit Special at myselfreliance.com.au and pick up a large protein shake, free with your kit.